What happens when late-night wit collides with royal defiance under Fox's unforgiving studio lights? What begins with polite laughter quickly unravels into tension thick enough to slice. Tonight, Greg Gutfeld welcomes Meghan Markle. At first, it looks like just another celebrity interview. But within minutes, Meghan's cool, clipped replies and Greg's relentless prodding steer the exchange toward dangerous waters. By the time the audience senses it, the interview has transformed into something else entirely. A showdown. The night started like any Gutfeld broadcast. A buzzing crowd, a cheeky monologue, Greg leaning into his desk with that trademark smirk. But beneath the jokes, the studio pulsed with anticipation. Everyone knew this wasn't a routine guest. Meghan Markle's arrival drew the kind of electricity you can't fake. She entered in a navy blazer over silk, posture sharp, stride deliberate. To most she looked polished, gracious, but a watchful eye caught the tightness in her smile. An unspoken calculation with every step. Greg introduced her with mock flourish. Someone who knows a thing or two about making headlines. Meghan Markle. The applause was polite, edged with curiosity. Meghan smiled, measured and diplomatic. Greg began casually, almost friendly. I've got to admit, it takes guts to sit with me. I haven't exactly been your biggest fan, have I? Laughter rippled. Meghan tilted her head, voice smooth. I think it's important to have conversations, even with people who don't agree with me. That's how we grow, isn't it? The audience clapped. Greg leaned back, letting the silence stretch. Then he struck. Speaking of growth, you've certainly grown your brand since leaving the Royals. Duchess, producer, podcaster. Pretty lucrative business. Built off a last name. How's that working out? Meghan's smile thinned. I don't see it as business. Harry and I have worked hard on projects that give back. Reducing that to branding is reductive. Greg smirked wider. Meaningful projects? Like the $100 million Netflix deal? The Spotify podcast? The docuseries from Montecito? Very meaningful, uneasy laughter. Meghan's tone hardened. Using our platform for good isn't shameful. We've shared our story to help others. That's not profit. It's purpose. Greg leaned in, voice cutting. Your truth, right? Because you always say my truth. Funny thing, truth usually doesn't need a pronoun. When it's your truth, isn't it just your version? The air tightened. Meghan's grip whitened on the armrest. Are you questioning my honesty? I'm questioning the concept. Greg shot back. Take the Oprah interview. You said there were conversations about your son's skin color. That was your truth. The royals had theirs. Which one should we believe? The audience gasped. Meghan's composure faltered. Her voice snapped sharp. The problem is people like you turn pain into sound bites. You're not here to understand. You're here for ratings, Greg chuckled. Come on, I'm asking what millions think. You've built an empire on victimhood. And sure, it worked. But that's not truth. It's strategy, gasps again. Meghan sat tall, eyes flashing. Victimhood? Her voice cut like glass. Greg, I endured relentless racist coverage. I got death threats. I was cut off when I needed help the most. That's not playing victim. That's surviving. Greg leaned in, eyes narrowing. Then why not just leave quietly? Why the tell-alls, the documentaries, the books? Why keep reminding the world how badly you were treated? Meghan's breath quickened. The Polish was slipping. Because silence protects the abuser, not the abused. She shot back. I refuse to be silent, the studio crackled. Even the crew stopped moving, hanging on every word. Greg tapped his pen on the desk, grin widening. And there it is. The real Meghan Markle. Not the smiling Duchess. Not the humanitarian. Just someone who sees oppression everywhere, but in her own privilege. Meghan rose halfway from her chair, her voice like steel. You want to talk about privilege? Sitting there mocking pain, profiting off cruelty. That's privilege, Greg, the audience erupted. Gasps and applause clashing in the air. The atmosphere was combustible. Greg leaned forward, elbows on the desk, tapping his pen like a duelist keeping rhythm. Meghan crossed her arms, irritation no longer hidden. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. Greg pressed. America, you've built this new life here. Mansions, deals, platforms. Must feel good to live in a country that actually wanted you. Unlike Britain. The crowd laughed nervously. Meghan's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? Greg raised his brows, feigning innocence. You weren't exactly embraced in the UK. But here, you've been celebrated. Quite the upgrade, isn't it? Meghan leaned forward, her tone sharp. Is that supposed to be a joke? Or just another cheap dig at the fact I didn't fit into an institution built on exclusion? Because if I wasn't wanted, maybe you should ask why. Greg smirked. Or maybe it wasn't about the institution. Maybe it was about you. Ever think of that? The audience gasped. Meghan's hands clenched on the armrest. So now it's my fault? My fault I was lied about, hounded, smeared daily? My fault my mental health collapsed because no one cared? Greg chuckled darkly, leaning back. I'm just asking questions. Isn't that what the media does? No! Meghan snapped, voice sharp as glass. What you're doing is gaslighting, twisting my reality into punchlines. That's not journalism. It's bullying, the audience murmured, split between shock and applause. Greg stayed cool, pen tapping. All right then, let's move on. Harry. Rumors are swirling. He's back in the UK. You're here. Trouble in paradise? Silence swallowed the room. Meghan's eyes blazed. Are you serious? Recycling tabloid trash? That's your angle? Greg shrugged. I'm giving you a chance to clear it up. Transparency, right? My marriage is fine. More than fine, Meghan snapped. But you wouldn't know because you'd rather peddle gossip than face reality. You're proving exactly why media can't be trusted. Greg tilted his head, mock sympathy dripping from his voice. Oh, come on. You can't sell a docuseries about your love story, then act outraged when people ask questions. You put it out there. That's the trade. Meghan leaned forward, her voice sharp, cutting through the air. The trade is me using my platform to show love, resilience, and truth matter, and people like you twisting it into cheap headlines. That's the trade. The air grew thick, heavy. The audience barely breathed. Greg didn't blink. All right then, he said, eyes gleaming. Let's get real. The royals. Do you even care anymore? Or are they just the convenient villains for your Hollywood reinvention? The question hit like a grenade. Meghan's lips curled into a bitter smile. Do I care? No, Greg, not anymore. I've moved on, and maybe the rest of the world should too. But of course, that wouldn't give you your headlines, would it? Greg pounced, leaning forward. So no regrets, then? Burning bridges, spilling secrets, selling stories. All worth it? Meghan's voice hardened. I told my story. I told the truth. If that makes people uncomfortable, that says more about them than me. Greg's eyes gleamed. Your truth again. Always your truth. Funny how it always makes you the hero, huh? The crowd gasped. Meghan's breath hitched, hesitation flashing for the first time. Greg pressed in, his voice lowered like a blade sliding between ribs. Speaking of playing the hero, Netflix. Rumor is you're negotiating for even more money. Care to confirm? Or is that another tale you'll spin later as altruism? While cashing the check? Meghan sat up, composure cracking. Her tone was ice. How dare you? My work is about meaningful content that uplifts people, not money. Reducing it to that just shows the cynicism you thrive on. Greg shook his head slowly, smirk never fading. Meaningful content? Meghan, you're selling personal drama on repeat. That's not uplifting. It's monetized misery. The words landed like thunder. Meghan opened her mouth, but nothing came. The crowd sat frozen, the silence unbearable. Greg leaned back, spreading his arms. You know the real problem? You're not special, not groundbreaking. Just another celebrity cashing in on their name and sob story. And deep down, you know it. That's why you keep shouting about your truth. Because without it, without Harry, you're nothing. Meghan's eyes glistened. For a moment, the mask slipped entirely. She blinked rapidly, trying to recover, but her breathing betrayed her. The audience shifted uneasily. The spectacle was raw, almost too real. Greg delivered the hammer. You're not a duchess here. You're not in the palace anymore. This isn't England where people bow to titles. Here, you're just another guest. And America doesn't owe you sympathy. Or applause. The words crushed the room. Meghan stared, hands trembling. Her lips parted, but no words came. Tears welled despite her effort to hold them back. For the first time, Greg's smirk softened. Not into sympathy, but satisfaction. He'd cracked the armor of one of the most media-trained women alive. The studio air pulsed with electricity, like the hush before a storm. Meghan shifted in her chair, trying to hide the tremor in her hands. Greg twirled his pen, savoring the silence like a conductor over an orchestra of tension. He struck again. You know what I admire, Meghan? Your persistence. No matter the contradictions, no matter the critics, you never drop the act. Her head snapped up. And what act is that supposed to be? Greg leaned forward, smirk deepening. The eternal victim, always misunderstood, always mistreated, always the brave fighter against the big bad system. It's predictable. It's boring. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Meghan inhaled sharply, voice trembling with fury. Boring! You think constant abuse, my mental health dismissed, my child targeted? That's boring. How dare you reduce trauma to a punchline? Greg spread his arms to the audience. See, that's it. Anytime someone pushes back, you retreat into outrage. You wield pain like a weapon. But people are waking up, Meghan. They're seeing through it. Meghan leaned forward, composure cracking, her words spilling fast and raw. You think you can sit there in your suit and tell me how I should process pain? How I should tell my story? You don't know what it feels like to be hunted, to be silenced, to be told you don't belong anywhere. You don't know what it's like to wake up every day wondering what lie will be printed next. Greg's tone turned glacial. Greg's voice cut through the air, cold and merciless. You chose this. You stepped into the spotlight. You married into the most famous family on earth. And the moment the attention stopped flattering you, you cried foul. That's not oppression, Meghan. That's buyer's remorse. The audience buzzed, the words hanging like smoke. Meghan's lips trembled, eyes wet, but her voice rose, shaking with fury. I chose love. I chose a life with the man I love. And what I got in return was betrayal, cruelty, indifference, from the very people who should have protected me. Greg leaned forward, elbows on the desk, his tone dripping with mock sympathy. Love, sure, but love has become your shield, hasn't it? Every criticism deflected, every question dodged, every inconsistency excused, because you hide behind that word like it's a free pass. Meghan shook her head, voice breaking. You don't get it. You'll never get it. This isn't about excuses. It's about survival. If I hadn't spoken out, I wouldn't even be here today. Do you understand that? Greg's smirk sharpened. Do you hear yourself? Every platform, every interview. You circle back to the darkest parts of your story because you know it sells. And you've convinced yourself that survival equals sainthood. The studio air tightened. Meghan's chest rose and fell, tears brimming despite her will. The audience shifted, sensing the shift in power. Greg pressed in. Let me ask you something simple. Strip away the titles, the Netflix deals, the interviews. Who are you without Harry's name? Without the royal connection? Would anyone care? The words pierced like a dagger. Meghan blinked rapidly, her whisper barely audible. I am more than his wife. I am more than a title, Greg pounced. Then prove it. Because everything, your career, your brand, every dollar you've earned since leaving, was tied to that family. You can run from the palace, Meghan, but you can't run from the truth. You're cashing in on being a Windsor. Without that, you fade into obscurity. Her composure shattered. Tears spilled freely under the unforgiving lights. The crowd sat frozen, caught between pity and disbelief. Greg leaned back, victory flashing in his eyes. And here it is. When someone finally calls it like it is, the mask slips. No polished answers, no clever comebacks, just silence and tears. Maybe, just maybe, the critics were right. Meghan wiped her cheek with a trembling hand. You don't know me. You don't know what I've survived. You can belittle me all you want, Greg, but you'll never erase the truth of what I've endured. Greg's reply was the blade's final twist. And yet, here you are, in designer clothes, in million-dollar mansions, telling the world how hard it's been. Meanwhile, millions of ordinary people struggle every day without the luxury of turning it into a Netflix series, the audience murmured. Some clapping, some shaking their heads. Meghan stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the studio floor. Her hands fumbled at her microphone, shaking too much to pull it free. Tears streamed openly now. The producers panicked behind the glass, voices shouting through headsets. But the cameras kept rolling. Greg leaned back, his voice carrying like a verdict. America doesn't bow to royals, Meghan. And this isn't England. Here respect is earned, not inherited. The words froze her mid-step. Her face was a storm of rage and devastation. For a moment it seemed she might answer. Instead she turned, eyes shining, and walked toward the edge of the stage. The studio erupted. Gasps, shouts, uneasy applause. Every footstep echoed like a drumbeat of defeat. And in that moment, before millions, Meghan Markle, the woman who once held the world's gaze with flawless poise, was walking out in tears, the image of composure shattered. Every step Meghan took seemed heavier than the last, her tears catching the studio lights, turning her face into a portrait of anguish. "Meghan, please," a producer called softly from the wings. But it was too late. Greg Gutfeld straightened in his chair, pen resting firmly on the desk. The smirk was gone. What replaced it was sharper finality. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice filling the silence. "There it is, the Meghan Markle exit. We've seen it before, haven't we? The moment the questions cut too close, the tears fall. And then, the walk-off." The audience stirred, a nervous mix of gasps and scattered applause. Meghan froze mid-stride, her back still to him, her body rigid. For a heartbeat, it seemed she might whirl around and deliver one final tirade. But instead her shoulders quaked, and she vanished into the wings. The cameras caught everything. The last glimpse of a duchess unraveling in front of millions. This wasn't daytime TV with Whoopi's calm interventions or Joy Behar's comic relief. There was no panel to soften the blow. This was Gutfeld's arena. And Meghan had stepped into it unguarded, never realizing how merciless the ground beneath her would be. Greg leaned forward, his voice cutting clean. "You see, America doesn't kneel to titles. We don't hand out respect for bloodlines or fairy tale weddings. Here you earn it. And when someone sits here pretending every criticism is cruelty, they learn fast. This isn't Buckingham Palace. This is reality," the audience erupted, some cheering loudly, others shaking their heads in unease. In the wings, Meghan's muffled sobs carried faintly through her still live mic, the sound lingering until a frantic producer finally cut the feed. Greg adjusted his tie, every movement deliberate, a picture of composure against her collapse. "She came here to sell a story," he continued, calm but merciless. "But stories only work if people believe them. And when every answer is arrogance, when every question is met with outrage, people stop buying. At some point, the palace walls, the Netflix cameras, the victimhood speeches, none of it can protect you. At some point, the truth walks in, and tonight it walked in right here." Applause swelled again, louder now, though laced with unease. A camera lingered on Meghan's empty chair, haunting, silent, a ghost of composure that once sat there. Greg turned to the lens, his voice steady, his eyes locked on the viewers at home. "I didn't push her out. I didn't ask her to leave. She chose to walk. And that's the pattern, isn't it? Walk away from the family. Walk away from the country. Walk away from anyone who doesn't nod along. But you can't walk away from reality forever." Tonight it caught up. The control room cut to a wide shot. A divided audience, buzzing, phones raised, clips already racing online before the show even cut to break. Greg placed his pen down with deliberate finality. "We'll be right back." Music swelled, jazzy and upbeat, but it clashed with the tension still suffocating the room. Meghan Markle had walked onto that stage polished and poised. She left it in tears, and the world had just watched her break in real time.